So, when I was given this sort of topic, I realized that I, just like I guess everybody else, always wanted to be a rebel. And I mean, if you grew up in the time where I grew up, I'm born in '79. I mean, by God, I mean, my youth was filled with these awesome, cool rebels. So when Justin called me up, I was thinking like, sure, what the hey, that sounds awesome, good topic. And then I had to ask myself, am I a rebel? And that put me in a lot of doubt. I was thinking back and forth, like, what is a rebel, by the way? Like, actually. And I came to the conclusion pretty quickly that a rebel is somebody who stands up against oppression or against establishment and want to change something. And quickly, when you sort of think about rebels, if you're not thinking about fictional rebels, and if you think about contemporary rebels, you end up thinking about people like these. Like, these are our contemporary rebels. They risk their lives to sort of stand up against oppression. They sort of want to tell the stories of how the established system, the governments are sort of lying to us or whatever. And I think that when I was faced with people like these, I was like, okay, I'm not a rebel. And I had to ask myself, why am I not like these guys? Well, first of all, I'm not brave enough, frankly. Second of all, I started to realize that when you're up there starting to sort of toy with power and government and truth and there's sort of these really, really big things, you got to be pretty convicted. You got to be pretty sure about what you're doing. Because there's a really thin line, I realized, between a rebel and a terrorist. And the thing about these, that this is, of course, lies in the eyes of the beholder. I mean, who's a terrorist and who's a rebel? I mean, Nelson Mandela was considered a terrorist by the United States for a very long time. And yeah, I mean, the United States have supported many people who later became rebels, became terrorists. So, I mean, this is definitely a thin line. And I think that's what I realized, that I think that I don't have the kind of conviction it takes to sort of really be that kind of rebel. So then I had to ask myself again, rats, I want to be like Indiana Jones and Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, right? So am I a rebel? And I started to realize that, I mean, there are other kinds of rebels, I think. I co-founded my company TNT in 2002, and I was 23 at the time, and we grew that company, the six of us, to 180 people with a lot of different offices, and we had customers like Google and Nokia and Samsung, and then in 2010, BlackBerry came along and said, we would like to acquire you, and we became BlackBerry. And when we started the company, we did not start that company to sell that company. We did not start that company to achieve all those things we later almost stumbled over. I would say we started that company because we were bored. We started that company because we wanted to work together. We wanted to develop. And our choice back in 2002 was to join a big corporate. There were not that many startups. And frankly, the idea of starting a startup was pretty extreme. So I think that we were rebels in a sense because we were really brave to actually do something which pretty much, I assure you, everybody told us was a really bad idea. And pretty much everything we did was a really bad idea. We started a company in 2002, just after the sort of the dot-com crisis, which is you cannot start a company now, that's really bad of you, it's a sort of very insecure market. We were 6 people, 6 co-founders, that's never going to work. And my parents constantly asked me year after year, even when TAT were 50 people in 3 offices, they asked me, this TAT thing, do you think that could be an entry ticket to get employed at companies like Stone Ericsson? And I felt, I don't think you've sort of gotten the point with this. This is kind of my cause, is not to be employed. That's kind of the reason I'm doing this. And I sort of realized that when we started TAT, I think we felt that we were rebels because we just did not accept the current reality of oppression. And that oppression was, join a big company. Please, be a part of the normal society. Don't be a freak. And I realized that there's another kind of rebels. There's a rebel against, it can't be done. There's a rebel against complacency. And there's a rebel against like settling for less. And I think that rebellism, I think, should be really glorified. Because I mean, look at people like Elon Musk, who is building an electrical car company in a time where electrical cars have been tried out. It's a dead end. We shouldn't go there. He's building a rocket ship company to pretty much replace NASA when the United States sort of is cutting NASA's budget. Look at Amelia Earhart, who flew across the Atlantic Ocean all by herself. And I would say even more, look at Amelia Earhart, who did that in a time as a woman, which was an even more gender unequal world than we live in today. I mean, these were true rebels. They were extremely. Elon Musk is a true rebel, and Amelia Earhart was a true rebel. But no, they did not try to overthrow a government. They did not try to shed light on somebody's shady business. They were probably bored. They probably wanted to develop. They probably just want to show that it can be done. And I think that is a passion and strength I think is really, really important. And I've started to realize that a startup, I think, is one of the best vessels and vehicles for rebellion. Because it is a way to say, this is who we are, and this is what we're going to change, and there's like an engine of how to do that. So I thought I'll do a three-step process of how you should start your own startup. So first of all, I think you got to find passion and an energy about a subject. Because you might already have a subject that you're sort of super passionate about. You can pick the big subjects: inequality, democracy, truth, the food system, environment. I mean, we have plenty of issues here. So, I mean, you could definitely start a company trying to change that. Or you can pick a smaller subject. You just have a product or a service that you just find broken, that you either see every day or use every day, and you just find that somebody ought to fix this thing. Or you can just go closer to home and realize you're not developing a person, you're not having fun, and you need to change that. And so you need to pick that and realize why you're doing this. Because I think the reason I really want people to do this is because building a startup is hard. It's a lot of work, but I would say it's not the work that's the issue. It's actually figuring out who you are. Startups, they don't die because they run out of money. They die because they don't figure out who they are. And I have a gay friend who's also a startup person who he described it very, very well. He told me about when he came out of the closet when he was in high school. And he said every time he talked about his startup the first year, he felt that he was coming out of the closet. It was like, so I'm still working at a big company. Our company is, no, well, maybe I shouldn't mention it here. Because you just feel so afraid that somebody's going to just say, what are you trying to do? There's this other amazing companies already in this sphere. Google are going to do that like dead easy. Facebook are just going to sneeze that out. And just go, oh, okay, maybe I should go back and work at an agency maybe. So I think you got to realize that you got to have that conviction, because you're going to be questioned about who you are. And that's also one of the greatest beauties of building a startup. Because you're going to figure out who you are. You're going to know in this process who you really are and what you really, really care about. So I think that, first of all, find that energy and the passion. And that can be something big, it can be something small, but it can't be, I want to do a startup because it sounds cool. Because then I don't think you're going to do it. I think that when you get the first real uphill, you're going to realize that, it's safer to settle. So find the energy and the passion, and it's in there. I mean, we have a lot of big problems in the world, so it's not hard to find things that should be fixed. Second of all, and almost more importantly, I would say, find other people. Find a community. When we started TAT, we were 6 people, which was, again, we were doomed to fail because we were 6 people, 6 founders. But I would say that as building a startup is a lot of an identity crisis. You need people around you. You need people to help you to figure out that you're not crazy. And you don't need co-founders. Actually, that's not very helpful in all times of the identity crisis. I've figured that during my years at TAT, it was like having 5 spouses. It's like whatever you want to do, you have 5 people who are really close to you who are going to say no in one way or another. At the same time, if you have 5 spouses, you have 5 people who are really close to you, but you know what it's like to have a spouse. There are good and bad sides. And the thing you never want to tell your spouse is that you're going to change something. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to do this dramatic thing, because that's always bad in the eyes of a spouse. So 5 co-founders might always not be a good idea. But make sure you have people around you that sort of share what you think. It might be that they share your cause, that they also want to fix the broken food system or the environment, because then you can sort of share and get energized by them. But I would say things that wasn't existing when we started TAT that exist now when I'm building another company is the startup community. Because one of the most amazing things when you're doing a startup is to meet other startups, even if they're not remotely doing what you're doing. Because when you listen to what they're saying and you hear how crazy they sound, you realize that you also sound crazy. And probably both of you are crazy, but in a good way, because you're after to change something. And I felt that every time I get to meet more startup people, it's this enormous, like, wonderful feeling of meeting somebody who actually understands what it means. When you're saying, like, one of my favorites is that in the startup world, there's something called minimum viable product. So first, you've got this get out of the closet identity problem, the first period, when you're like figuring out what you do. And when you figured out that, you're trying to build something which you both can build and you can sell, and you can do that repeatedly. That's what's called a minimum viable product. And a minimum viable product is, if you have children, or you have been a child, maybe you remember that part. But if you have children, then you know when you're studying that day telling your friends, oh, my son can talk. You know that always happens to parents. And as friends of those parents, that's not that interesting always. And especially as that person comes back 3 weeks later saying, like, you know what? It's so awesome, my son can talk. And as a friend to that parent, you're saying, you said that 3 weeks ago. I mean, 3 weeks ago, he was like, now he's like, dad. Like, yeah, okay, wow. And then 2 months later, you suddenly go, you know what? My son can talk. And your friend goes like, yeah, okay, what's it this time? He was like, this morning he was like, dad. It's like, wow. That exact thing happens in startup land, but it's called minimum viable product. It's like, we just reached minimum viable product. And all your startup friends are like, awesome, what is it? It's like, we're going to do this thing, and it's going to, oh, you really nailed it there, man. And then like 2 months later, you're like, we really got it this time. And slowly, you get closer to that minimum viable product. And all of your startup friends, the only reason that you should really make sure to tell these people is that they've also been parents. They've also been in the period where they thought their son or daughter could talk. So they know what it feels. And they can really tell you, like, yay! Instead of like your parents, like, first of all, what does that mean? And second of all, you said that already. So make sure to keep close to other startup people, because they're going to give you so much energy, and they're going to be a great bouncing board on whatever question you have. And I think that's the thing I would encourage people in the startup land to do. You can coach other startup people. You can be in the boards or advisory boards or other startup people. You don't have to be more experienced. You don't have to be older or whatever. You just have to be a startup person. You just have to be a person that says, okay, how do you feel? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Because all of those questions you're asking yourself. And as a coach in a startup land, you're going to figure out that the person you're coaching is going to teach you, well, a lot about your own startup, because you need to sort of ask yourself those questions. So now you decided you want to change something. Now you decided that you're going to mingle with other people and maybe find co-founders. And these co-founders or whoever, when you mingle, they might become co-founders, they might become employees, they might become customers, they might become acolytes of your cause. But anyways, they're going to be really useful for you. There's no reason for you not to talk to these people. If you're going to plant a massive garden, you're going to have to start with the first step. There's baby steps to everything. And I think all of us have written a poem, build a song or whatever, done an iPhone app, done a really cool logo or whatever, and saved that to our hard drive or Dropbox and not published it. Because we were afraid that it was not perfect yet. It was not ripe. It's like, that's like going out and saying, I'm going to build a 5-acre tomato plant land thingy. But you're never going to do that, because it's going to be too much work. But if you just start by planting small tomatoes and sunflowers in your yard, then step by step. And you're going to tell your friends, like, yeah, I'm trying to grow tomatoes here. And they're going to be equally impressed, and actually more impressed, by you saying, I'm just thinking of renting this acre. Because they actually see that you can do things. And I think that you got to realize that Rome or PayPal wasn't built in a day. I mean, Google, when they started out, was like a laughable experience. It was like, you know, all those things that all other search engines had. You could like search on like geography and language of the post and like the person's last name who posted the thing. And then Google came along. It's like, there's one thing and there's like search and like, I'm lucky. It's like, where are all the thingamajings that I can press and click and do options on? It's laughable, but it turned out to be good. And I mean, look at Facebook. I mean, come on. They were called the Facebook. I mean, come on. All these experiences, they were ugly ducklings. But what differentiates the people who succeed is that they're ugly ducklings who dare to fly, even though they know that people are going to laugh at them in one way or another. Because they know that they're going to grow up like a swan, because they're going to learn from every laugh, from every interaction with other people. And I think when we started TAT, a friend of ours said to us, you should meet Sony Ericsson. You can probably do awesome things with them. And we were like, yeah, we don't think that mobile is going to be anything worthwhile working in, but sure, go ahead. So we met these Sony Ericsson managers, so we got a date booked. And we worked day and night. And when the day came, we like, you know, dressed up like 23-year-olds do. You put on a suit, which you had for like graduation. And you're like, this is the people that companies have, right? And we brought like our most luxurious lunch, dry baguettes. And these people came over. And they didn't taste the baguettes. I don't think they didn't taste the baguettes because they were lousy, but because they just sat watching of what we had been spending these nights and days of building. Because, I mean, we had been really, really focused, whereas a big company, they don't have that focus. They don't have that luxury. They can't build those amazing things. So when they sat there at the meeting, they just looked at what we built and like, have you done this? And we handed over our like cheap printed business cards that we got. Yes, take this because you're supposed to take this. And I'm supposed to get one from you, I've read somewhere, I've seen on a post online. I think everything we did that day was extremely laughable. I think we were an amazing ugly duckling. And I think, I mean, boy, we were happy when they left and they didn't laugh loud. But boy, we were also happy that a couple of months later we signed an agreement with them. Because apparently all of those things that we did that were kind of phony, well, they could see through that and see the core and see you can do good stuff. You don't have to dress up in prison business cards and serve dry baguettes. You can just be who you are. And because you know your identity, you could just sort of stick to that. And I think that was this thing that really taught me about like being who you are, doing what you believe in is going to be a big difference. So I think that realize when you build a startup that it starts with a first step. Perfection is going to kill you. You should put an X in your calendar and saying like, okay, the 23rd, I'm going to launch this, I'm going to publish this poem on Tumblr, I'm going to do this thing, whatever you've decided to do. And when that day comes, you do that. You just do that. There's no excuse that day. It's like you publish. Because what's going to happen is not that people are going to laugh at you. Unfortunately, it's going to be that nothing happens. Because most of the time, you're not like Spotify and launch a shitty feature and people are going to hate it and flame you. You're going to just launch something and hello. But it's going to be a great experience because the next time you launch something, you will maybe have a community and you will have people following you. But every time you launch, you're going to learn more. So you should just mark an X on the calendar, do it, whatever that do it is. I think that a really important thing there is to remember better a short no than a long maybe. We all dislike these dates where people don't go on not telling us the truth about what they think. And you're probably doing that to yourself. You're probably doing something today where you're giving yourself a long maybe. Instead, you should just say, either I go no or I go yes, and I've got that date, and that's when I do it. So now you know the 3 steps. And I think that if you look at people who also were rebels, I mean, Gandhi once said that first they ignore you, then laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. And Robbie Williams also sung this. I don't know who was first, but but anyways, the point of this is that nobody will laugh at you until you have something. So you don't have to be afraid being laughed at because you will be ignored till you get to that point. And the awesome thing is when people laugh at you, that means you're on second base. And when people start to fight you, you've progressed pretty far because you're one step away from winning. And I think that's a really important lesson to remember, that challenge you're facing is just a step in the process. And you will get past that. And I think that the the main question I want you to ask yourself is really what you want to do. And I'm increasing the volume here. That's not what I wanted to do. And if you look at Stefan, he once said, or he wrote in a book, making money isn't hard in itself. What's hard is to earn it doing something worth devoting one's life to. And I think that's for me a really core point. I think I've always thinking that what I was doing, is this really worth devoting my life to? And I think that you're going to find that your cause is going to grow over time. When we started TAT, the cause was to get to work together with people you respected and liked. Because the big difference about starting a company and being employed at a big company is that at a big company, there are always going to be the assholes and pricks you don't like. But at your startup, there's going to be the people you like. I mean, if you look at people like Evernote, like Phil Libin started. When they started their first company, when he started his first company, his only cause was to not have to work with assholes. That was their business plan. And he exited that company and started another company, which goal was to not work with assholes. And he exited that company again. And then they started Evernote. And I think that is an extreme luxury of building your own company. You get to choose the people you work with. And I think that for me, when I started TAT, was one of the most amazing things that I was able to develop in the field I wanted. If you start a company when you're 23 and you have the choice of going to a big company, when you're 23 and join a big company, you know what you're going to do, right? You're going to brew coffee and sort paper clips for someone else. If you start your own startup or join a startup, which is definitely also an option, you're going to be whatever. You can be EVP sales. You can choose whatever title you want, because you're going to be the person who does that. And you're going to be the only person who gets to fail every day and not be fired and learn everything, because at a big company, you don't get that many chances to fail. Because that's what's also a problem with big companies, that a big company does not promote failure. It means that they don't promote experimenting with things. And the only way to learn is to experiment. So joining a big company means that you're gonna vote for the money option and not the learning option and experience the life option. Joining a startup or starting a startup means that you choose life. And frankly, I really believe that. And then that changes. So when you started TAT, that was the cause. And then when you start to employ people, when we started employing people, my cause was to make sure that we didn't have to fire people, of course, but could employ more people we liked and build this and deliver what we wanted. And when the customers said they wanted something, it was the most amazing pleasure to be able to look around in the room and say, okay, who can figure out how we're going to solve that? And somebody was ingenious enough to figure out how to do that, and we delivered it to the customer. And yes, we worked day and night, but it was just this amazing feeling. We're solving something together, which, I don't know if it ever happens in your life otherwise. You don't get to do those things. You never get to together solve problems in that kind of way. And then when TAT grew, when we were even bigger, the cause just became, for me at least, it was like this huge family of really awesome people. And you just wanted to make sure that everybody loved the place and everybody was having a good time and everybody developed. And we didn't go into the traps that big companies do and become managers. And that was just such an inspiring feeling that, so it started out by us choosing what problem we want to fix very locally, so to say. But then you suddenly realize when you're building a company, you can actually change of how companies are built. The whole CSR thing, you can just throw CSR out the window because you can decide that half of our salaries goes to charity. If everybody in the room says, yeah, that's cool with me. And you can just set a new standard for how things should be done on so many different levels. And I think that is an extremely empowering feeling. So what I want to urge you to do is to become a rebel. I think that we all have the chance to change the world for the better. I think you know that you could start a movement, that you could join a startup, or at least stop telling startup people that they're crazy. Because they do need your mental support too. Thank you very much.